Good morning, everybody. Jay Womack, founder and CEO of Infinity Workforce Solutions. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our webinar will begin in just a few minutes. I appreciate y'all sitting on hold. While we're here waiting for everybody to jump on, I want to give a special shout out to our existing clients that are here with us today. You are proving to your entire workforce that safety is your number one concern, it's your number one priority, and we appreciate that because we are very, very good at delivering training for safety, for orientation, for ongoing corrective action, and you obviously have taken the jump into the company right now and you're using it, you're saying that your people are valuable to you, and that's exactly what we want, that's what you want, that's what your people want to hear. So we do have all the answers. We know exactly what we're doing in web-based training. We've been doing this for 15 years, but I have a special offer today for our prospects that show up. We'd like to offer you a 30-day free trial using our system completely. See what it's all about. See if you like using something like this. You know, remote training has jumped to the forefront of the world. In the last 90 days, the world has shifted, it's changed. Remote training, we are the experts. We know more about remote training than virtually anybody in the entire, world, universe. So I want to offer the 30-day free trial. Time offer is limited. Yeah, we can't make this go on forever. I wish we could. I'm even going to throw in a CSR rep, a client service rep that can make this thing hum for you, get user activity up on the system, because that's the key, get your people to use the system. I don't care how many bells and whistles you've got, if they're not going to use it, it's not going to have an impact for your company. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all about. We want to see your top line and bottom line improve. We want to see your safety record improve. That's what we do, and we do that better than anybody out there. Thanks for sticking with me. In the meantime, it's what you came for, it's the webinar. So Mark, if you're ready, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Jay, for that offer for the 30-day demo and free trial. I'm sure we'll have some people participate in that, but thank you also for your years. I know I personally have been involved with you for over 20 years in driver support and safety support for our industry. So I can personally attest that Jay's interest in our industry is not new. He's shown his historical support over the years, and we thank you very much for that. So before we get in, we've got a lot of information to cover today. My name again is Mark Rhea. I've got 35 years in the industry with Frozen Food Express, FFE, and Lisa Motor Lines, and have certainly been involved with remote training for years, and with Jay and his group. Just before we get started, a couple of comments I'd like to emphasize on the benefits and or expectations, if you will, for using remote training. We are completely mobile. 100% Infinity Workforce Solutions is a mobile platform, so you don't have to, drivers don't have to find a computer anymore. It's all cell phone based. We also, a few metrics that I'd like to cover real quickly. We've had clients that have improved crash frequency up to 20%. 20% improvement in crash frequency, up to 80% improvement in violations, and cost improvements up to 50%. So those are very strong numbers. I personally can attest of using the tool and achieving those results. As specifically corrective action, it's a very powerful thing. If you can get a corrective action content out to a driver who's been involved in a minor fender bender or put out a service or has a critical event that's been triggered, that you can get right back to him. And of course, litigation support, having documented your training is a powerful defense in litigation. We average almost 300,000 completed assignments per month, and it's estimated that has saved 1,000 lives per year and millions of dollars in insurance premiums and verdicts over the years. So that's just kind of an overview of why Remote training is working and active in our industry, and I'll start with introducing our guest speaker. If you'll go to the next slide, we're going to talk about two things today. Roadcheck 2020, which starts tomorrow, as well as some updates in the industry. And joining us today is my old friend, 20 plus years, Mr. Mike McConnell, based out of San Antonio, Texas. Mike has been involved with multiple fleets, Cisco, FFE, to name a couple. He does risk assessments for our insurance partners. He does DOT audits and reviews. He participates as a subject matter expert in lawsuits. And more importantly, he's a member of the ATA Regulatory Committee, which met last week, and he is going to give us a complete update on that. So, Mike, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, Mark, always glad to be here. Always good to see you again, and can't wait to get started. You guys do a great job with these, and can't say enough good about Infinity and the the professional product that you get out of that with drivers.
Okay, well, let's go to the next slide, please. Roadcheck tomorrow. We failed. We had to cancel our spring road check for obvious reasons, but we welcome back our enforcement community. Industry professionals like Mike and myself have seen the positive results that Roadcheck can achieve. This year's theme is driver qualifications. It's very simple this year. Driver qualifications. Do I have a valid CDL? Do I have my medical card? Am I online driving on my on my ELD? Do I have a backup paper logs? Do I have the information, the one-page information, how to use an ELD? Very, very basic, very easy to get through. Mike, you've gone through 20 or 30 road check, maybe more than that, over the years for multiple fleets. It's all about awareness and preparation. Can you give our clients a little insight on how they can prepare their fleets, drivers and driver support staff, for road check, which starts tomorrow?
Yeah, very glad to, Mark. So the number one, you can't put out too much communication to your drivers starting today if you haven't already. I'm sure a lot of you probably already have done that, but push those pre-trip inspections. That's a key. One light could in theory put a truck out of service. If that's something that's caught on a pre-trip and gets repaired before it leaves, obviously you've been proactive to keep that violation off your record. And the same thing with your mechanics, especially if you have a safety lane in your shop, like a lot of companies do, where their trucks roll through when they come on the yard. Another thing that was very helpful, and Mark, you'll probably remember, is we took our mechanics out to one of these roadside, it wasn't during road check, but it was a roadside inspection. Mark and I had established a great relationship with DPS back in those days, and they actually got under the truck with the troopers on the creeper, and they showed them exactly what they were looking for in these level 1 inspections. It was huge for us. So the mechanics were catching a lot of things in our shop that they normally might not catch. If it's just the travel on a push rod to see if a brake is considered within parameters or out of service. So I think it's a good idea if you can get out to one of these locations. I know they usually do one out there, excuse me, on Interstate 20, just east of Terrell, but they're set up all over the state, pretty much anywhere there's a scale. Excuse me. Then of course they'll also have troopers rolling mobile pulling trucks over and doing these either roadside or, having them follow up to the scale, follow them up to the scale to do the inspection there. But again, I can't stress enough how much you need to just preach this to your drivers. It needs to be, you should be able to message through your ELD system, put those messages out there, and make sure not even more than pre-trip. Every time they stop, they should do a quick walk around when they crawl back in that truck and just make sure that at least every visible component they can see is in good working order. And that's probably the key to it right there, Mark, I believe.
Yeah. So for our clients, you should immediately reach out, if you haven't already, to your client success rep and say, hey, I need some content to get out to my drivers this afternoon on the road check, on an updated CDL, on buckling your seatbelt, just the basic stuff, and that can happen this afternoon. I would encourage you, and if you're not a subscriber, we'll have the opportunity here in a few minutes to have somebody contact you where you can, in fact, get this content out as quick as this afternoon to prepare for tomorrow. So it's all about awareness. So, I'm looking at this picture. This is way station right. So if I'm tooling down the interstate, minding my own business, and I get flagged into that way station, and I don't have my seatbelt on, and I don't have my CDL, and I don't have a medical card with me, and I'm logged off duty, not driving, I'm asking for trouble. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. A proper ELD should catch the driving status if the truck's rolling, but they can, it's not uncommon that they can have a glitch in it where it just doesn't work, or something of that nature, but especially like a team. You got one driver in the sleeper, one in the seat. I can remember times, even on paper logs, where the driver that was supposed to be in the sleeper was behind the wheel and vice versa. So it didn't go over too well. Something I left out too real quick, Mark, is most of the inspections they're going to be doing in this 72-hour period will be level 1 inspections. And that's everything. They're going to crawl under the truck, measure brake strokes. They're going to look at everything, brake drums, all of the, air lines under the trailer, any component that is considered a safety component that they can place you out of service for. That's what they'll be looking for. And as well as everything with your driver. But as Mark said, they're going to be putting a heavy emphasis on drivers.
Okay, so getting the information out. Of course, you and I have had multiple discussions with the driver that does get put out of service, and his or her normal response is, nobody told me that that road check was going to be this week. I wouldn't have gotten put out of service if somebody had told me ahead of time to have my act in order. So we've heard that many times. So this afternoon is your opportunity to take that excuse away and say, okay, here's the assignment. Here's what we got pre-trip. We got client success reps on standby to get that information out. So, and again, this is not a small project. We anticipate 80 to 100,000 inspections nationwide in the next 3 days. So, and of course, we had the spring road check canceled. So we might even be trying to make up a little bit on the inspection frequency based on the cancellation that we had last spring. So anyhow, if you don't mind, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, Mike, you want to cover the different levels of inspection and what would trigger those?
Sure. Glad to, Mark. So the level 1, as I was saying a while ago, is a 37-step inspection. They're going to look at everything compliance-wise that your driver has to have. So, of course, the CDL, the medical card, they'll check the hours of service. Obviously, they've got to be able to produce their last 7 days from the ELD. That is one of the components of the rule. And something else I believe Mark mentioned, they've also got to have paper logs as backup in case that ELD malfunctions. So so level 1 inspection is the most thorough inspection that they can do. Then the level 2 inspection, it's the entire vehicle excluding the undercarriage. So that's basically a walk around. They're looking to get everything. The only thing they're not doing is getting on that creeper and falling or crawling up under the truck to measure the brake strokes. And but you know, it's still pretty visible. They can see the excuse me there. Hopefully that didn't pop up on everyone's screen. Anyway, they can see the airlines, for example. You know, they can look across and see brake shoes. That there's a, you know, they can see daylight between the brake shoe and the drum. Then there's a good chance that flips from a level 2 to a level 1. They'll go ahead and crawl up under there and flip that to a level 1 inspection. And then a level 3 is just the driver requirements. And this is probably, you know, what we kind of call the easiest inspection. As long as your driver's compliant, that's all they're really checking, along with the paperwork for the vehicle documentation, which would be your insurance, registration, and then the copy of the manifest or whatever the load's going to be. And by the same token, it's something that doesn't ring right, or during road check, they're going to have dogs out as well. And we had a case where we actually offered our warehouse at FFE, and they brought a couple of trailers in that the dogs had hit on to unload them on our dock and try to find drugs. So that's another thing that obviously if something like that happens, they'll flip that to a level 1 inspection, and they'll go through the cargo and they'll drill holes in it, whatever they got to do. Those dogs have such sensitive nose. Kind of in a nutshell, Mark, what the 3 inspection levels are, and what you can, you know, share with your drivers going forward for the next few days.
Yes, and obviously if everything's in order, it will not trigger a level 1, but it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Again, the way to avoid the level 1 or avoid the out of service is very simply, and we will be giving a flyer to all the participants that covers the top 10 violations, what exactly the PowerPoint, what exactly the enforcement officer will be looking for this year. So we will send that in an email format. So let's go to the next slide, please. So, Mike, you want to go over what are the driver violations categories and what rings the bell?
Well, as you can see, obviously the big, and these are 2019 numbers from Roadcheck 2019, which was last June. I don't recall the exact dates, but these are the top categories that trucks were, or drivers actually, these are driver checks that were placed out of service. And obviously hours of service is the big one. Keep in mind, last year the ELD was not a mandate, so there were still some trucks running paper logs, and then probably more running AOVRDs, which basically is an ELD, just the ELD has a couple of more components tied to that rule. So they were doing electronic logs, but you know, there were certain things. But anyways, you can see obviously the biggest is your hours of service violations. Your wrong class of license, that would be an example of a person with a Class B CDL hops into a truck, even if it's a straight truck that's rated at 26,000 or below. If the load's heavy and that weight goes over 26,000 pounds, that's now it does not have a CDL. Let me stand corrected on that. It was normally driving a non-CDL required vehicle, and the weight goes over, they're going to look at the actual weight and not the weight rating itself. So if it's 27,000 pounds, for example, then obviously the driver is required to have a Class B CDL in that scenario. So that's the kind of things that you'll see around the wrong class of license. And then, of course, on false log, to me, that kind of ties in together with hours of service. Other is just going to be anything really that doesn't tie to driver fitness, hours of service, unsafe driving, or drug and alcohol. Those are the four basic categories that tie into drivers. So anything that doesn't fit in one of those categories is what you would call other. Then, of course, right on down the line, suspended license, drug and alcohol, expired license, and then violating license restrictions. So that would be like you've got a restriction on your license to wear corrective lenses and didn't have contacts in or have your glasses with you. That's the type of violation they're talking about there. And that's really low. So kind of in a nutshell, Mark, as you can see with false logs and hours of service kind of tied together, that's really logs to me. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, yes. And of course, last year, as I recall, Roadcheck emphasis was on hours of service. That was when the electronic log mandate was fairly fresh, and there was clearly an emphasis on hours last year.
Yeah, and when you put those, you know, to me, you tie those two together, that's more than 50% of the total violations had was nothing more than log violations, so huge. I think a lot of that's corrected with the ELDs now. It's really hard for a driver to falsify a log in an ELD. Not saying it can't happen, it can, but typically if it's a compliant ELD, it's going to automatically catch the movement of the truck when they're driving after a certain amount of time or a miles per hour. I think it's 4 miles per hour. I'd dig back to the rule. Don't quote me on that, but it will catch that movement and automatically pop them onto the driving line. And
yeah, of course, unassigned drive time is clearly probably the leader in the hours of service violations, which driver just failed to log on to the system. So the truck goes down the road, it jumps onto the drive line, and it's unassigned. They don't know who's driving.
That's a great point, and that's why the companies need to make sure and do their edits. Another one we ran into a lot was drivers not logging out of the system. So they come in the next day or their next shift and go to work, and they're still on duty, and the minute they start driving, it shows them in violation. So they're common things. But those are editable logs, too, and you can, as long as you've done the edit properly, and the system will catch that, and you're perfectly compliant doing that.
Of course, there's a whole nother world of equipment violations, but the emphasis, the theme for this upcoming road check, which starts tomorrow, is driver violations. And again, everything I'm looking at, we have a complete library of multiple content that can be assigned this afternoon to get this information out to the drivers and the driver support staff so they can confirm with their drivers. Okay, get ready. You're going to see an active enforcement throughout the week for Road Check 2020. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears, Mike. I'm gonna switch gears with you. I know you're a member of the ATA Regulatory Safety Council that met last week. And you have some hot off the press information that you can share with us about issues and things that are up for vote or things that are going to be enacted. So I'm going to let you just kind of cover these issues one at a time. And these are significant issues that have a direct impact on our industry. So if you don't mind, won't you just tell us what was discussed in last week's ATA Regulatory Committee?
Sure, Mark, glad to. So this, of course, due to COVID-19, we had to do virtual meetings this year, which is the first time that's ever happened in the history of ATA. But I have to say it went really well. They did a great job setting them up. The format of the webinars was great. So it went off well. Then, of course, as most of you probably know, the final rule for the hours of service changes happens later this month. unless something last minute comes in. We're not foreseeing that. And that was not a big topic in the committee this time because, the finalization of the rule the last time we had met was kind of the big thing. So probably one of the biggest changes is if you're running local trucks, in the past, you've only been able to go in a 100-mile radius. That radius is moving out to 150 miles, and you are also limited to 12 hours in a day. That rule now changes to 14 hours, just like a driver on the law, which made sense. And that's the same thing we told FMCSA for years is, really these local people they've got their clocks running all day, so they're typically not tired till the end of the day when they get back, where these people out doing a lot of windshield time tend to be more fatigued that we felt. So that was kind of it on the hours of rules, or I'm sorry, the hours of service changes.
Yeah, and just as reference, Mike, we have a scheduled webinar next Thursday exclusive to hours of service. We've got Dave Oswecki with former ATA Executive Vice President. He's going to go over the details of the sleeper berth changes and the entire thing. So no surprises. The good news is at least there are receptive to listening to the industry on some of these changes.
Yeah, and that'll be good. I've had the pleasure of working with Dave Osecki for many years since I've been involved with ATA. Though he did move on, he's a wealth of knowledge, and he's a very good resource, no doubt about it. So the other thing that came up were the clearinghouse results. As you know, in January, that became a final rule with some caveats at the end. They had to actually put a hold on it due to the medical field not quite ready to follow the spirit of that final rule to have all the tests uploaded to the system. And it was actually the FMCSA side that slowed that down. So in January, though, everything particularly but that in the rule was still finalized in January. So you're still required to register as a carrier. You're required to report those results. You're also required to check to see if you're hiring a driver, for example, if they have those test results in the system. And in fact, I think we've got a slide coming up here. I won't get into that much, showing some numbers with the clearinghouse results. On the entry-level driver training changes, not a lot to tell there. That's still kind of on the back burner. It's a hot topic, but it's not one that's on the forefront right now due to a couple of other things that are coming up. The biggest thing I can tell you on that is one thing we know for sure that's going to be in that final rule is that any school, truck driving school, in order to be a certified school for the ELDT training, which is called entry-level driver training, has to be an accredited school. So it can't be Mike and Mark goes out and buys a couple of trucks and starts training. We can do that. However, until we go through an accreditation model, we cannot do business with the federal government, basically. And accreditation is basically, I don't know, I would kind of compare it to a compliance review. They're going to come in and look at everything, your curriculum, your equipment, everything you do, and make sure that you're following everything that needs to be done for safety of the road, and then either give you accreditation, deny your accreditation, or tell you need to do these things, and we'll come back in and take a look. So anytime
long past due.
Yeah. Anytime you see that designation for a school that's accredited, you can bet they've been scrutinized pretty heavy. And I would lean more towards an accredited school all the time.
And they are providing some guidelines, both classroom and behind the wheel, which is long past due.
Yes. Yeah, and especially that behind the wheel, that's part of, I worked for a truck driving school for about 3 years, and boy, we were running those students through there like crazy at one time when the It was about the time the driver shortage hit back in the 80s, if you recall, and we were getting a lot of students through there. So that's gonna change. They're gonna have to have a minimum 40 hours behind the wheel, as I understand the rule. And I don't recall the exact classroom time, but it's the hands-on to me that is probably the most important. That's where they're going to really learn the nuts and bolts of how to operate that truck and operate it properly with a good instructor. Okay, this next one was a question that I believe came up from one of your customers, Mark, and I'll address it to what I know about it. Proposed change by Congress to raise the minimum insurance coverages for motor carriers from 1 million to 2 million. And there is some validity to that. There's not very much talk about it right now. All we know for sure is that obviously the industry is very opposed to this, just because, number one, insurance rates are so high right now that this is going to drive it up even more. Would also probably cause companies to raise their deductibles even higher just to be able to afford the premiums. And, you know, right now, $1 million deductible, or what's called an SIR, self-insured retention, is not uncommon. And that means you're paying the first $1 million on any accident that happens. And, you know, for a medium to small carrier, that could put them out of business easily. You know, how many loads would you have to transport to generate $1 million, not just in revenue, but really profit? Because that's money right off your bottom line. Okay, so that's
the increase from the proposed increase from 1 million or up to 2 million, as I understand, was kind of snuck in with one of the stimulus packages. And I guess my concern is where there's smoke, there's fire, and it's possible we will see this $2 million minimum coverage issue resurface.
Of course, nobody has the crystal ball, but we're hoping that part of it gets squashed. Obviously, ATA's all over this. They're just not. This hasn't come close to a vote as of yet. It is out there, so there is validity to it. But you know, I don't know so much that it's. And Mark, you and I talked about this offline some too. And I think you had one of the probably the best solutions to what that answer may be is plaintiff's attorneys pushing this, and I think there's a lot of validity to that, in my opinion as well. So. You know, it's hard to say. I think if it gets squashed out before the bill ever goes, maybe that at least buys us some time as an industry. But you got to remember too that, you know, there's a pretty big thing happening in DC in November as an election year. So a lot of these politicians are doing anything they can that they believe is going to make them look good in the public's eye to get a vote. And it happens. It happens every time. So a lot of this stuff they try to get pushed through quickly just before an election. I guess the best answer to your question, Mark, is we hope not. But I don't think it'll completely go away. It's just my opinion. I think we'll see.
I think we could agree. The fact is insurance coverage, insurance premiums, insurance renewals are a top industry concern for our carriers, and by increasing the minimum to $2 million, that just compounds that issue. So that's a big issue that's floating around out there, and we'll just have to keep an eye on that. So thank you for the update on that.
You bet. So the next bullet point, there is a House bill now, has not gone to vote yet, but to include mandatory brake assist on all commercial vehicles, and also speed limiters, or what you probably commonly known as governors, to limit speeds. This to us is probably kind of overdue, because the technology's been out there a long time, and I think some of the truck manufacturers are already even spec'ing the mandatory brake assist. I'm sure it's not, they're building that cost in somewhere to the price of the truck, but you're seeing more and more of this, and we feel like that's probably a good thing. And if you're not sure what that is, that's simple. If the there's a sensor on a truck that can sense if you're coming up on the rear of another vehicle too fast, for example, and will automatically start applying brakes to whatever pressure is needed to avoid the collision. Or it could be a lane change, or a number of different things that the brakes will come on automatically to assist in that. And then of course the speed limiters. There's no knowledge right now if there will be a set speed limit, because there's so many variations out in the states now. I think there's some states as low as 60, and then when you get out to the far rural areas of Montana, for example, trucks can run 80 miles an hour out there. So as a committee, I can tell you that we've talked about this a little bit in the regulations committee. We felt like 65 is probably a pretty good standard number. But by the same token, the drivers have to understand, just because you're speed limited at 65, if the speed limit's 60, it doesn't mean you can run 65. And they'll have to understand that as well. So here's the big one. We saved the big one for last. So hair follicle drug testing, that's been going back and forth for several years now. I can tell you there's one large carry out of Arkansas. I know their VP of safety very well, and they've been doing this for quite some time. Drug hair follicle testing, hair follicles will hold the drug much longer than body fluids, such as urine or blood. So you can get a much better history on a person that's been using as opposed to someone that hasn't. And from what we know from the medical side, what they call a recreational user is someone that just does, say they snort cocaine a couple of times a month or once a month, is not going to stay in as long as somebody that's doing it daily or smoking marijuana, for example. So that's kind of where hair follicle testing is. That's coming, I believe. We're going to see that as an accepted type of test. As right now, as you all know, only urine is considered acceptable for drug testing. This will be if the rule passes as we understand it, will be acceptable. Doesn't mandate that you have to use hair follicle testing, but again, this is a newborn rule right now, so we'll see how that plays out. We're watching that. The next one is really the big one. There's a vote coming. You may have heard of this. The week of September 21st, there is a bill out on the House floor right now that'll be voted on the week of the 21st to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level. This was proposed by a Democrat House representative out of Delaware, I believe, if my memory serves me right. And, it would almost lead one to say, what's that guy smoking? But I think the fact that he introduced the bill kind of answers that question, doesn't it, Mark? But this is huge. And so if this passes the House, it's still got to go to the Senate. And the buzz on Capitol Hill that we're getting from ATA is this probably would die in the Senate. But this is going to happen at some point, I'm afraid, because there's, I think 11 states now that have legalized marijuana. I don't think that'll go away. This is one that, it's just, there's so many back and forth on this. It's a safe drug to use. It's safer than alcohol. I don't know. But I think at some point we're going to see this happen. Now, the scary part to me is if they decriminalize it federally, they're going to have to take it out as a panel for testing, because it's no longer for DOT testing, because it's no longer considered a controlled substance. So if that happens, you'll see a standard DOT test minus marijuana. Now, non-DOT, for example, if you're testing for all accidents, you can do a non-DOT test. You can test as many panels as you want on a non-DOT, but on a DOT test, that'll go away. Huge
So
thing.
that is up for vote, and that spins off a myriad of issues in our industry. There's already, I don't know how many, but 20 states that have legalized marijuana for recreational use, but the science is very, very firm that the impairment from being under the influence of marijuana is very real, and this is not a minor. And just for reference, I think we will probably conduct a webinar exclusive to the reality and the regulations of marijuana usage. I've heard numbers as high as 18 to 20% of the motoring public has marijuana in their system at any given time. That's 1 out of every 5 vehicles you see going up and down the road. So it's not only an issue with the drivers of the commercial vehicles, it's them watching for the motoring public that are under the influence of marijuana.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, man, it's scary, at some point. But one thing that I'll clarify too is that even though if this passes, keep in mind it's got to pass a House vote, then it's got to pass a Senate vote. At that point, the president still has to sign off on it. So it's not a guarantee that this is going to go through. However, if it does, and it takes it off the controlled substance list, the states can still have their own regulation on it and consider it a banned substance for use. So that doesn't necessarily mean that every state can start selling weed like they do in Colorado and some of these other states. Simply means that federally they are not going to consider it as a controlled substance. I hope that makes sense.
No pun intended, but kind of like the minimum insurance, where there's smoke, there's fire. So we will. That is a significant issue, and we'll certainly watch the vote on that and see if that comes to see where it goes. It's a huge issue in our industry. So we will. The reality is we've made over the past 25, 30 years so much progress with the random drug screens and getting drugs out of the cab of our commercial vehicles, and this just seemed like it would be a step backwards to me. So I hate for us to give up that ground that we've gained relative to impaired drivers with controlled substances.
Yeah, I agree. And again, these are the highlights from our meetings last week. We talked about some other things, but these were the things that I felt like was important to get out to the as much of the public as I could. And by all means, if you've got questions on any of this, you can reach out to Mark or myself, and be glad to give you more detail on it individually offline.
Okay, so you're busy taking notes, I would assume, during the ATA's regulatory committee with these huge issues on the table. And I do think we have some clearinghouse results. If you could go to the next slide. Yeah, here we go. As of August the 1st, there were only 29,862 drug screen violations recorded with the FMCSA clearinghouse. That seems like an astounding large number to me. It speaks for itself. I'm sure that was a topic of discussion within the regulatory committee.
Yeah, and this is just the first 8 months of the clearinghouse taking results too. Keep in mind, that's 8 months of data.
And then below that, it shows, THC from 2007 to 2014. Of course, that's still before a lot of the states' deregulation of marijuana. It jumped from 8 to 12, and again, I've heard it's as high as 18% right now. And of course, we have some of the people that do the combination of THC and alcohol, and they're on the road. They are out there. It's a live issue, big issue, very, very big issue.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that, but I think the clearinghouse is something that's been needed, because in the past, any person that was terminated, for example, for a positive test that may want to come to work for us, probably not going to list that company, and there's a chance we won't find out. With the clearinghouse, that's all going to be transparent to the industry. So that's
was it the consensus of the ATA that the clearinghouse, I know it had a rough start on some administrative website issues. Was it the consensus that the clearinghouse for drug and alcohol is a success?
Yeah, I think the numbers show that. When you see the amount of positives that are reported, that's 29,862 violations. It's not necessarily that many drivers, because there were some double ups as well. But, that's that many results that we have knowledge of now, that you have as good information when you make a hiring decision. So, yeah, I think it's huge.
And ultimately, the driving population will think twice about using controlled substances.
That's
ultimately where we want to get to.
That's a great point. I mean, you recall, Mark, we were working together, I believe, whenever the random testing first came out. We're giving our age away a little bit, but how many, at first, how many drivers tested positive? It was huge. And then that number really roller coastered down. And I think that's what you'll see here. The word gets out that, hey, this is really working. You'll see less users. And that's, that was the intention of the rule. So, yeah, I think it's going to work.
Well, thank you for that update. And if you don't mind, let's go to the next slide. We've covered a lot of ground here today. Let me just, before we get to this, Roadcheck 2020 starts tomorrow. We have content available this afternoon. You can get out to your drivers and driver support population. It's very basic theme this year: driver qualifications, valid CDL, a medical card, online driving on your duty status, paper logs, seatbelt. Very, very basic. But again, it does require awareness and preparation, and the time to do that is this afternoon if you haven't already done so. I would also like to restate Jay's original offer for a 30-day demonstration. Included in that is access to our training library, which has excess of 800 pieces of information exchange, content for the drivers, to include OSHA, hazmat, pre-trip, hours of service. All of these things that we've been talking about are available. Immediate communication. Our system is mobile. The days of having to find a computer to sign on and do your assignments are behind us now. So I would encourage you to reach out, and also a client success rep is standing by if you just want to talk and say, call in. What do you got out there? What can I do? What do you recommend? What are people doing? We have complete tracking and reporting that obviously helps in litigation and defense strategies. So all of these things are available. Won't take long. And if that's available for the next 30 days, thank you very much, Mr. Jay Womack. And if you'll go to the next slide, I know we've got a couple of questions. There's my contact. There's Mr. McConnell's contact. And I'll just click here. Mike, we've got a couple. Here's a poll question. If you would like free access to the remote safety training for your drivers, just click yes in that box and somebody will get a hold of you. If you would like to talk to Mike about some more of his observations and information that he received at the ATA Regulatory Committee, to include hours of service, to include the speed limiters, to include the insurance minimum increase, to include the marijuana vote, I would certainly just click yes. He will immediately get back with you on that issue. And we've got a couple of questions, Mike. I'm going to read the first one, and I'll let you answer. We have had officers write us up for not having the ELD owner manual. Our drivers have showed them the manual in the ELD device, and they still wrote us up because it was not in paper manual. I have data queued the violation, but have not replied. You want to comment on the requirement for the ELD manual, training instruction manual, or card?
If I understood the question right, they didn't have a paper copy, so they had it online. Was that in the ELD maybe?
I'm assuming they showed it to them on the ELD.
Or on their phone, maybe electronically. The rule, as I understand it, says that you only have to be able to basically show the officer that you have a way to what's the word I'm looking for? You have an outlet to go to use the system, mainly as far as law enforcement goes, to be able to produce the previous 7 days. So I would challenge that, and I know they said they haven't gotten a response back on that. You may want to, whatever state that was in, you may want to also contact the head of the commercial vehicle enforcement and just give them a call. Most of them are involved with CVSA, and they're used to fielding questions like that. So I think you covered the rule by doing that. The way I read the rule.
I think they've got a very good chance of getting the data queue. I would also comment that in the resource feature of the Infinity Workforce Solutions platform, there you can put the instruction manual in the resource, and that will suffice for that requirement. That's a very good question. Now, I will also say that you absolutely must have paper log backup. If you don't have a paper log in your truck, they're going to write you up, and you're going to lose a data queue on that. So they're very well aware that the ELDs can go down, and there is a requirement to have paper logs inside the cab as a backup. Is that my understanding correct, Mike?
Yeah, order a couple of cases of log books and just make sure you've got one in each truck that stays, because they're rarely going to use them. So it should be able to stay with the truck, right with the permit book, or in the side of the door there in that little pocket, or that's what I do. Basically assign the book to each truck.
Okay, next question. How will this work with the extension? This is a great question. Extension on license for endorsements. You can't even get an appointment in Texas if you have a CDL.
Okay, I assume that question they're asking is the license is expiring and they can't get an appointment to go get it renewed. Is that how you're reading that?
That's how I'm reading it, but it says for endorsements. So if you needed a hazmat endorsement or a doubles endorsement, and it's not on your CDL, it's not on your, and you can't get in, would that be an out of service violation?
If it's not on the license, you got to remember on the side of the road, they're gonna grade what they can see and what they can pull in their computer. So unfortunately, if it's not on there, yes, you'll get a violation. I know though, as far as if you're talking about just expirations, the president renewed that waiver just because of the COVID and people not being able to get into the DMVs. I believe till September 30th, so they won't be putting people out of service for an expired license. Otherwise, if you don't have the endorsement, I'm afraid that's going to be a violation. Unfortunate in the times we're in, but I don't.
So endorsement more than likely would be a violation. Expired. There is an extension granted on that because of
and that's going to be state to state as to when they can do it. The other thing I would check is that's only a written test to do that. So I would think I'm pretty sure Texas is doing that online now. Since COVID, I think they're doing that online.
Okay, well, we've expired our time limit. We've covered ground from Roadcheck that starts tomorrow to how you can prepare for that by getting some content out to your drivers and your driver support staff, so you can eliminate that excuse. Nobody told me I wasn't ready. If you'd have told me, I would have been ready. That can be done this afternoon by simply clicking on that poll question. I also want to make sure that everybody understands next Thursday, we will have the former executive vice president from the ATA, Mr. Dave Oswecki, cover in detail the revised hours of service regulations that will be enforced, that will be hot off the press, to cover the sleeper berth provisions, to include the regional component of that. That's Thursday, September the 17th at 10:30 a.m. Mike, as always, thank you for your experience and expertise on Roadcheck, as well as the updates that you provided us relative to the ATA Regulatory Committee. And there's some stuff happening there. Thank you for that. And if there's no other questions, we're going to sign off. And everybody, please prepare for Roadcheck. It's a very good exercise for our industry, and it starts tomorrow. I'm signing off, and we'll see everybody next Thursday at 10:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.